Good morning and welcome to Coffee and the Word. Have you ever heard the term or the proverb, deferred hope makes the heart sick? Deferred hope makes the heart sick is a phrase that talks about the fact that the longer something that you're hoping for, the longer something that is deferred, the more likely you are to diminish in your hope, and the more likely you are to wane from it, and the more likely you are to begin to believe it's never going to happen. Like that's the premise behind it. But did you know that the very redemptive story of God that was promised in Genesis chapter 3 is promised to a man named Abraham when his wife is 90 years old? God tells him that his wife Sarah is going to have a son. And this is almost preposterous in the time it was being told. Like, really going to have a son? And then a little bit later there's no son. And then it's still there is no son. And so what they end up doing is something we shouldn't do, which is taking matters into their own hands, right? And they decide to do a different plan. They decide to take a different approach. But God hasn't forgotten what he's planning to do, but it isn't the right time yet. And so God is taking them, um, God is deferring this hope, or this hope is being deferred. And it's so interesting because though they thought, well, maybe we need to help God out a little bit. And I think sometimes we think maybe we need to help God out a little bit. Uh, or maybe we become frustrated, or maybe we begin to think that it's never going to happen. Like all these promises are never going to be fulfilled. And we become frustrated about it. But God's whole plan that He's put into place with Abraham and Sarah depend on this hope that He's given them, the son that He's going to give them. Because the son that Abraham and Sarah have becomes the father of the son, who becomes the father of the 12, who become the father of Judah, who becomes the father eventually of Jesus. And Jesus is born through that lineage, and that was God's plan all along. In fact, when God meets Abraham very early on, God tells him, through all the nations will be blessed through you. That he will be the father of many nations, and all the nations on the earth will be blessed through him. And he's talking about Jesus here. And at this time, Abraham doesn't have a son. At this time, Abraham's wife seems to be barren. She can't have kids. And I think they've resolved themselves to this. And then God shows up and is like, no, you're going to have a son with Sarah. And Sarah even laughs at this idea. That's how preposterous this becomes at one point. And yet Sarah becomes pregnant and she gives birth to a son. They name their son Isaac, which literally means laughter. And, and and I think it's interesting because we find Sarah laughing at the idea, and then we find Sarah laughing because of the joy of it. That she is given this son, this deferred hope is realized, and God has showed up. God has done what he says he'll do. And I know that yesterday we talked, and you should go watch the sermon, but yesterday we talked about waiting on the Lord. And that God is doing what God is doing in the time, in his own time. And I know that it's easy to get frustrated. I know that it's easy to get discouraged. I know that it's easy to take matters in your own hands. But as we enter into this Advent season, I want you to understand that one of the things that God has us do is trust Him and wait for Him. The deferred hope of God will come to fruition. And I'm guessing that there are some things you've been waiting on God for, and you just don't think it's going to happen. And maybe you're becoming discouraged. Maybe you've been praying over your marriage, or maybe you've been praying over your kids, or maybe you've been praying over somebody who you love so much that has continued to struggle. Maybe there's somebody in your life who has a problem you really hope they're going to, but you're beginning to lose hope. And here's the thing I want you to know. I don't know what God's going to do in your situation, but I do know this. There's never a time in which you should give up your hope in what God is doing. God is doing a work that we can't imagine. So hold on to God's promises. He's working things out. Be confident in the God that you serve. I understand why deferred hope would be such a problem when you talk about the world, because people disappoint you all the time. But I want to assure you that God does not disappoint. He is not slack concerning his promise. He will fulfill his word in everything. And I pray that you'll rest in that hope, even if it is deferred. I hope you have a wonderful Monday. God bless you. This has been another edition of Coffee and the Word.